This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. Your holy presence living in me. This is my daily bread. This is my daily bread. Your very word spoken to me. And I This is the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe.
This is the air I breathe. Don't you just want to remain there and keep breathing that in? Your holy presence living in me, loving through me. Do we forget that sometimes? I know I must admit that instead of fully breathing in that air, I found myself focused on a little straw aperture, breathing through a little tiny aperture of that love. I was talking with Brian about something this week, and we were getting more and more focused on our positionalities around that, and I knew I was right. I was absolutely certain I was right. And from that rightness of my mind, instead of breathing this air of love that I share with him, it was like getting narrowed down to this little tiny straw. And I woke up and everything seemed to be surfacing around that, and that topic kept coming up again and again. And I woke up yesterday morning and I'm like, I'm breathing through this little teeny tiny straw, and I still know I'm right about that straw. Oh, the positionalities. But I was realizing I was walling off all the love, all the joy, all the life experiences that I have with him. I was exhausted by it. I let it go, I let it down, and I opened up, and I realized this is the air I breathe. Love has no finite expression. And it made me think about sometimes in our faith traditions, be they diverse as they may, do we sometimes narrow it down to one tiny straw of this incredible nature of expressing love? I had the joy this last week of exploring more of the Islamic faith. And as I dove into those teachings, I was refreshed and renewed at the methodology, the premise underneath Islam, which is not that there is a personal religious life and a public secular life, but that Islam approaches everything in life from the sacred, from a connection to that which gives them life. I want to share with you a couple of statistics because I know you love them. Islam is one of the fastest growing religions within the world. Currently, it is the second largest religion in the world. There are probably about 31%, 31.2% Christians, which is the largest. The second largest being Islam. Our Muslim brothers and sisters are making up about 24.1%, 1.8 billion people on the planet. That's a lot of brothers and sisters that we have here. And in the United States, it's the third largest religion. We have Christianity, Judaism, and then Islam. Islam, as I said, is growing faster than any other religion, primarily because they are having more children, 2.9 instead of 2.5 to what Christians are having, and they are also younger. So the community is growing and expanding. If the current demographics continue, by the end of this century, Muslims will be the most popular religion within the world. There are 56 Muslim countries that have Islam as their primary religion, and we are joined together with them in many ways. And what I'd like to do is dive into their faiths. What do we share in common? They are a monotheistic religion, much as we are as well, and they believe that the teachings of God have been brought through prophets, and you might recognize a few of these. Adam, Abraham, Noah, Moses, Jesus. Yes, even our Muslim brothers and sisters recognize the teachings of all of these prophets. This is where we begin to differ in that they believe that the final prophet was Muhammad. And Muhammad wrote the Quran beginning when he was 40 for 23 years until his death when he was 63. And the Quran is a very sacred text to our Muslim brothers and sisters. When I was interviewing Anita Farrell, who shared with us our heart-centered meditation today, because she studied Sufism, the mystic branch of Islam, for 5 years. And while she was even studying unity at the same time, became a licensed unity teacher. But she shared this loving experience, really, because I could feel it in her bones as she was saying it, is that what we share most commonly with our Muslim brothers and sisters is love. Is the experience of love and the kindness and the generosity of spirit shared between one another. And if you get a chance to talk to her, I highly recommend that you do so, as she has much to teach. There are 5 pillars in Islam, much like our 5 basic unity principles. And for those of you who are new, I want to name those really quickly. The first principle in unity is that there's one presence and one power, that is God, the good, omnipotent. The second principle is that you and I are created in that image and likeness, and that we have that Christ nature within us, and that we are inherently good. And the third aspect of our basic unity principles is that the thoughts held in mind reproduce after their kind. In other words, what we focus on, what we feel, what we believe, what we hold in our being tends to manifest in our world, and that we can influence our world by choosing truth and aligning with that. The fourth principle is that through prayer and meditation, we know the presence of God. We are practicing and downloading that divine mind of that infinite presence by being aligned with it through the practice of prayer and meditation. And finally, the fifth principle is that it's not enough to know this. We have to do it. We have to be aligned with it. We have to act upon it for our lives to be fulfilled and the expressions that they were created to be. Now, there's 5 basic pillars of faith within the Islamic tradition. And the first one we share. There's only one presence and one power, that is Allah. They call God Allah. And their statement of faith is that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. So the very first principle we share in common. The second one you'll recognize as part of our faith system as well, and it's a practice of daily prayer. In the 56 countries that have Islam as their primary faith tradition, the mosque will call all of the community to prayer 5 times a day. They do it right before sunrise, at dawn, at the zenith, right after the sun's passed its zenith at midday, in the afternoon, at dusk or right after sunset, and then sometime between sunset and midnight. Imagine with me, if you will, that if we all pause together to pray systematically, the drumbeat, the rhythm, the harmony, the connection, the sense of community that would bring into our lives. I had the joy of being in France, and the bells toll at 7 a.m., noon, and 7 p.m. So it gives me a sense of what this community, this lifestyle is like, about tethering our breath with that life of God and communing with that intentionally through prayer. The third pillar of Islam is a little bit different than ours, but I like it, and I wonder if you would consider this. Their third pillar is about being conscientious in contributing to those less fortunate to themselves. They give 2.5% of their wealth every year to those in need, as a commitment to God and as a process of being in worship to that which has given them all things. The fourth pillar is about Ramadan. It's the month of fasting. It's the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. And from all the daylight hours, from sunrise to sunset, they fast from both food and drink, including water. And then they also fast from smoking or passive smoking, from any intimacy. They also fast from any evil words or deeds. And then they break that fast once the sun has set, and we will be having a dinner, an iftar dinner, this next Thursday. I highly recommend that you come to that. I think it's going to be a beautiful occasion of breaking bread with our brothers and sisters and honoring them in their practice of Ramadan. The fifth pillar is the pillar of the Hajj, which is every sane and capable, financially capable person in their lifetime is to take a trip to Mecca. And in this journey to Mecca, they join on the ground at an evil level with all of their Muslim brothers and sisters. Everyone wears white. All caste, all status, everything is set aside. And they recognize the equality of men and women, the quality of all beings, races, colors, creeds, as they join together in worshiping that presence and power that has given them life. I love all of these teachings, and I love a couple of things that I've realized is that the entire Islamic faith is a way of being. And it's integrated into everything that they do. It's this process and this pattern, this tapestry of life itself. And that's why they are so committed to their practices. We live in a religious pluralistic society. And us in America have an opportunity, because of that religious pluralism, to get to know our Muslim brothers and sisters. If you have neighbors across the street, we have neighbors who are Muslim. Stop and get to know them, say hello, understand the similarities that we share as one, and celebrate those similarities and honor those unique differences. I want to close my time and give Gunnar some time to set straight anything I may have said that may not have been accurate. With a Sufi poet, Rumi. Rumi tells us that moonlight fills the sky from horizon to horizon. And how much moonlight gets inside of us, the room of our being, is dependent upon how open its windows are. So let us open our hearts, our minds, our welcome, our love, to welcome Gunnar Arslan to the lecture, and appreciate your presence.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, and thank you, and I'm going to repeat it. I go to churches to teach about Islam, and I think from now on I'm just going to give your number to the people who are asking, because you did a beautiful job. I mean, how do you fit that in 10 minutes? I can't do that in 10 minutes. Even 8 minutes, right? Not even 10 minutes. So I need to take some lessons from you. So I thought about what to talk about, what to share with you about my faith, and no matter where I started, I always ended up in this particular time with two concepts, compassion and hospitality. So I'm going to share a couple teachings from our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon you, about these concepts. And so the first teaching is the Prophet said, let me remember the exact wording, he is not a believer who goes satisfied while his neighbor is hungry. He is not a believer who is satisfied while his neighbor is hungry. And I'm sure if you're coming from a Judeo-Christian background, you recognize a similar teaching, or that you remember the similar teaching from your faith tradition. And that's not accidentally the case. It's because Judaism and Christianity, Muslims consider themselves a continuation of that tradition, of the Judeo-Christian tradition. As you beautifully put, the prophets come one after each other. So Moses is our prophet, and Jesus is a prophet, and Muhammad is our prophet. That's really the difference. So when I ponder about the saying of the prophet, the first thing that stands out to me is kind of the absoluteness of that first part. He is not a believer. It's very, there is no room there. It didn't say he is not a good believer. He is not a weak believer. He's not a practicing believer. He is not a believer. And when we talk about belief is a center part of our faith. So belief is where we start. And in Islamic tradition, the goal, or the ultimate goal in life, is to progress every day, and mostly using the Sufi traditions to open your heart and your mind to get closer to God, and eventually to reach a level where you're one with God. That level is where you love God if at all possible, as much as he loves you. So it's about, but if you love God, the natural consequence of that should be that you love God's creation. And I liken to, my 5-year-old brings me a drawing of hers, and I love the drawing, no matter what she drew. Even if it's just a single line, I love it, not because of the drawing itself, because who brought it to me. So it's similar. So all this creation, this entire universe, and all the animals in it, all the plants, all the insects, all the human beings, they are all God's creation. And when you look at them, you're supposed to see God's reflections, and then care about them, and feel compassion about them. But not everybody is at that level where they're close to God and have a heart wide open, like Rumi described, to let all that moonlight in. So some of us cannot think, and like me, cannot think about all the suffering all over the world constantly. That's maybe impossible. We cannot think about all the destruction going in the nature, or all the animals that go extinct. But in this particular teaching, the Prophet kind of gave us kind of tiny piece that we should be able to do, and that's care about your neighbor. You don't have to think about the people in Syria. You don't have to think about the animals going extinct somewhere in the world. You should, but that's not the requirement, right? The baseline here. That's why it's so strict. If you cannot even take care of your neighbor, if you have no problem being fully satisfied while your neighbor goes hungry, go back and look inside and question that belief, and make sure that you're not kidding yourself with that connection. Or the other way around, if you're sure about your belief, you're absolutely sure that there's no problem with my connection to God, I love God, God loves me, then put it into practice. Maybe that's where we're missing. And I love your, I don't remember what number it was to put it into practice. Was it number 5 of the unity? Yeah. So put it into practice. That's actually very true in our tradition as well. Belief in things is absolutely necessary. It's a start. But if you just believe, you end up where you start. And you're supposed to progress. One of the Prophet's teaching is each day, if you don't put on yourself, you're on the losing self. So if yesterday was the same as today for you in terms of progressing, then you have lost one day. So that's one of the teachings. The second one, to kind of explain this, I have to give you a little bit of history. 7th century Arabia, when the Prophet received his first revelation from God, and it took 23 years. So it wasn't like, here's your book, go study it. It was more like, while living, whenever the Muslims needed guidance, they do something right or they do something wrong, a revelation would come. And that's eventually compiled into a book that we call the Quran. And when they first started, there were maybe about 90 or 100 families in Mecca, which is the hometown of the Prophet. But the majority of the people were polytheists, and they were persecuting the Muslims. And it became to a level of being that was unbearable, and they had to flee Mecca, basically. And they moved into Medina. There were a few Muslims there as well, and they welcomed them. So what happened is the people in Medina who helped these people, we call them the helpers. And the people who actually moved to Medina, we call them the immigrants. So that's actually a very well-known concept in Islam. So anybody who immigrates to my land, I am supposed to be the helper. So I go and study what the helpers did. They opened their homes, they basically shared everything they had. They cut in half is yours, half is mine. And so there is this story one day. A man, one of the immigrants, comes to the Prophet Muhammad. He's very hungry, probably hasn't eaten in days, which was not such an unusual thing because they didn't have much. The Prophet himself, if he found a couple dates and some milk in a given day, that was a good day. So this man asked for food, And the prophet, generally what he first would do is try to help the need. So he goes home, but he finds out that he can only offer water, nothing else. He doesn't have anything himself. So what is he going to do? He reaches out to the community, the Muslim community, the handful of people who are around him, and asks them, we have this poor person here. Is there anyone who can feed this person? And one of his followers, his name is Abu Talha, says, yes, I'll take him. And, well, the husband-wife relationships have not changed much. The wife is not aware of this, obviously, at home. So he runs home. They don't have cell phones either. He runs home and tells his wife, we're going to have a guest over. And the wife explains to him, well, all I have is this little cup of soup that I was preparing for the kids, and it wasn't even enough for you and me. I was just going to feed the kids and put them to bed. So that's all we have. So now they have a problem. What are they going to do? They have a guest coming over. They have hungry kids. They themselves are hungry. But they decide that this stranger sent by God is more important. They decide to put their own kids hungry to bed. And then they devise a plan because they know if they tell this that this is the only food they have, the stranger would not accept it either, or at least wouldn't be comfortable. So they devise a plan. They take the guest inside their home, and when I say home, I think about a mud hut, and it's lit by candles. They dim the lights to a level where you can barely see anything. And the three of them sit around this cup, and they start eating. Except the host, they pretend to be eating. They put their spoons in, just put an empty spoon in their mouths. And they let this guest feed himself. And after thanking the host, he leaves. And they go to bed with hungry like their children. The next morning, when Abu Talha goes to the mosque, the prophet finds him and asks him, what did you do yesterday night? Because something you have done prompted God to inspire me some verses. And it's a long verse talking about how the helpers help the immigrants. But then the final part of the verse goes like, indeed, they prefer them over themselves, despite poverty being their own lot. They prefer them, even though they are in poverty themselves. And that's kind of the teaching that you will find in the Quran and the Islamic teachings all over the place. Every time I read these verses, I try to put myself into the shoes, especially of that mother. I just cannot think, I don't know if I will be able to do what she has done. The first part, I probably think most parents will do, prefer their kids over themselves. I mean, if you have little food and somebody is gonna get hungry, it's gonna be the parents, obviously. But then the strangers comes in, this man they don't know and maybe never see again, but he needs it more than your own children. Can I take that away from my kids and put them to bed and then give this to the stranger? I don't know. I hope I'll need a little more Sufi practice to open my heart to get to that level, to be with God, and to a level where I care about not just my neighbors, not just my fellow Muslims, but all of humanity. And that's really the message of Islam. I'd like to leave you with these two teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon you, and I hope they inspire you as much as they inspire me. And thank you, peace be upon you.
Thanks for joining us today. And if you like the message, we invite you to like it, share it, and please subscribe.
We are a New Thought church where lives are transformed. So come on, check us out at unityhills.org.
Namaste.